Thank you all for joining. We know this is an extraordinarily busy time for many people, and also a time where lots of us are looking forward to some time off one way or another, or a break from some of the pressures of the last 6 months. My name is Richard Graham. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist and the clinical lead for Good Thinking, and this is our second webinar called the Good Thinking Guide to Mental Health Apps, where we're meeting with those that have developed some of the apps that we support on Good Thinking, and that is to sort of help anyone who might want to use them or share them with others understand both the thoroughness with which they were developed and also the sort of understanding of how they can help, because we're learning that when we can share with people how apps work and what they might be able to do for you, we get a much better uptake. I'll just share my initial screen and then come out of this in a moment. So the program for today is that myself and Samira Rahman from Good Thinking are going to be talking with Dr. Nihara Krause, the founder and chief executive officer of the Stem4 Teenage Mental Health Charity, who developed a number of apps, 3 of which we'll be talking today. And we'll also be hearing from Tioni Fernando from Partnership for Young London, who has been working with the digital health ambassadors that are collaborating with us at Good Thinking to ensure that the resources that we develop and provide for young people in London have been sort of thoroughly scrutinised, and in many ways we are also co-creating content to help people feel that they are valuable, trusted resources. I'm going to come out of this for a moment already in terms of not sharing the slides. I'll be giving a bit of background shortly to why why and how Good Thinking developed its young people service, but we thought as almost a sort of icebreaker at the beginning, we might ask for anyone to post into the chat at this point any thoughts they have on how we might better meet the mental health needs of the young people of London, and especially during the recovery phase of COVID. We know historically that CAMS has had ongoing struggles to meet all of the needs. So what are the sort of thoughts that those are on the call are sort of having in terms of how we might better meet the mental health needs for Londoners? And obviously there's no correct answer. This is just a way of trying to think together about how we don't leave anyone behind, really, at a time where the pressures on the health service and public services more broadly are great. So any thoughts anyone's got? If anyone wants to type Good Thinking, obviously we'll be very pleased. Any new ways anyone's coming across of reaching better or supporting better young people? It's probably rather unfair, really. I should probably be asking Sajid Javid, really, shouldn't I, rather than yourselves. But if you can keep that in mind, that might be something that kind of is always there in the background for us at Good Thinking. It's simply not a matter of using technology to support more people, but how we might use a range of innovative sort of approaches to better support young people. So at that point then, having perhaps sort of rather put a dampener on things by reminding us all why we're doing this, really, which is to offer more support, and I will go through. I'll just give a few minutes about some background to why Good Thinking exists and what it particularly means in terms of young people. The background to Good Thinking goes back over a decade, where research on the mental health needs of the adult population was revealing that up to 1 in 4 people were struggling with a mental health difficulty, and for that group 75% of them were probably not receiving any support, and in fact the early studies suggested if they were, it was likely to be medication from a GP. So if we look at London then, with its population over 8 million, that's 1 to 2 million people would be experiencing mental health problems. And at the same time, we did a lot of research of talking to those people about what support they wanted, and many of them were already online, searching for information online, etc., looking for resources that we would now think of perhaps as supporting better self-care and not always wanting traditional services. When we look at the needs of young people, we're looking at a group of approximately 2.2 million under the age of 18. And the historical research and more recent research from NHS Digital suggests that at least 5 to 19-year-olds, and this is pre-COVID, of course, would have a mental health difficulty, with young women having greater difficulties than young men, and we can come back to that later in terms of what that might mean, with over 2% having the sort of neurodiverse difficulties or eating disorders and specific mental health problems, and then certain groups being definitely more affected by mental health difficulties, so those in the LGBTQ plus community having greater mental health needs than those from other communities. We know this is a time where mental health difficulties are arising, so if we can support someone in a preventative way, perhaps doesn't solve every problem, but certainly by the time we're getting to the teens, and even more so by the age of 24, most mental health disorders would have become apparent, and really the response you get to them, of course, can make a huge difference to your experience later. The problems of self-harm and sadly suicide have also been shown to be increasing over the last decade, and those are areas as well that we want to be doing more. So the needs of young people in London in terms of their mental health are well established, and we wanted to do more in the same way that we did with the adult population, recognising there was more to be done. We start always with an evidence review with our colleagues at Public Health England, and it seems so obvious really that of course young people at this point would be using the internet more for searching for health information than their adult relatives and so on, and will also be more likely to be using apps for a whole range of activities. And the evidence review of the research suggested that the online environment did have certain advantages as well for young people, because young people are more likely to be sensitive or concerned about stigma and that in relation to the health issues, of course, but of course other areas of life. They may find it hard to talk about health problems, and because you tend on the whole to be quite physically healthy, lots of young people don't particularly have a relationship with a doctor, like a GP. And they did like the privacy and the anonymity that searching online and reading information would be offering them. Excuse me. Of course, it's a time of development, of developing sexuality and identity and experimentation, and of course not everything there is always so well supported by health services, with fear of judgment. And then, of course, worries about what might be an emerging mental health difficulty, and including ones such as eating disorders that can have such an impact over life. And so with greater access to the internet, research online, and also a desire to do more for oneself, young people were saying that they did want the opportunity for something trusted in the online world. Of course, lots of worries about safety, as well as issues like data and privacy and so on. So we did a lot of work in developing our service, looking at the different frameworks that you'll see across the bottom of the screen, from the European Union's directive of GDPR on data protection, child safety online from the the UK Internet Safety Council and its online harms white paper that we'll be seeing developments of this year, and then even from the Information Commissioner, what's now called the Children's Code, which is ensuring that technologies are developed to be age appropriate, because historically the internet has tended to treat children the same as adults. Finally, we have a whole range of different standards that have been evolving in the health space, from NHSX that have the current standards of DTAC, digital technology assessment criteria, if you want to look that up, and the National Institute for Clinical Excellence Health and Care Excellence has its own digital health technology framework. So lots of things there to try and establish whether or not something can be trusted, be safe, and also be effective. But we also recognise there was a gap in thinking around safeguarding and ensuring young people who were not in situations where they felt safe and comfortable. And so we were talking through workshops with the NSPCC, Childline, Bernardo's, the safeguarding leads for the BBC and the Carnegie Trust, and then government departments, as well as tech companies like Super Awesome that have done a great deal to think about how to provide safe online spaces for young people. So we really wanted to also be making sure we were at the cutting edge of how to support young people safely online. But then we wanted to learn more. So I won't go into this slide too much. We first commissioned an agency called Normally to talk to young people about their thoughts about mental health and the support they wanted. And this was coming less so from the sort of health angle and more almost from the digital. Normally a very creative organisation, so did lots of creative workshops with young people. There's a nice quote there, and there's a great one coming up that will make sense in terms of why we engaged with Stem4, and lots of opportunities for young people to express themselves and feedback in terms of that, and you know, the experience of using NHS resources, and very clearly, you know, for a generation that has very good expectations of what one might hope for from the online world, lots of things that we do in the health space, we're not meeting that. We tried to engage as many diverse groups as possible across London through surveys and individual interviews and group interviews, as you've seen. And there were just a few findings that really make sense. One is, whatever we do, we have to make it relevant and relatable. There's no one size that fits everyone. And if it doesn't feel relatable, young people said we won't use it. This is a generation also that's already very knowledgeable and savvy. And they're using social media in all sorts of creative ways. And again, we can't in any sense undermine or diminish what is a very helpful development in that way. But then what that perhaps also leads to is the request for more advice that they called teen to teen, which were stories and support of what worked from people who get it, people like me who understand your life as well as the difficulties you're struggling with. Some really thoughtful comments about how to support young men, that it's still hard for boys to open up and get support, and I think that's true across the lifespan really, and again, that's work in progress. We need to be utterly respectful of culture in all sorts of different ways. And then finally, that this isn't just a talking shop where we're saying things, it needs to be leading to actions that really do lead to help for all. And I would hope that's what good thinking is trying to achieve. So lots of opportunities. I think Tierney from Partnership for Young London will be touching on this later in terms of creating content, providing those peer support avenues, and even thinking about how a Spotify playlist for young people who are struggling with a low mood or anxiety can really boost them at that moment and help them feel better. So lots more creative ways of thinking about how to support it through health. We also looked with our social media marketing partners on what people were looking for online, and although we'll be talking about apps, actually what came across vividly is they do a lot of activities looking for information, and you'll see across the bottom it's not very clear. There were lots of categories often to do with time of life, situation like issues in a family or issues in education that go way beyond defining something as a sort of anxiety problem or low mood issue, etc. So that's informed everything. And then we had feedback from the digital health ambassadors. But I'm not going to go on for much longer. I just want to leave you with one thing before I hand over to Nihara, which was a very powerful comment we heard many times, which was there was no advice online for helping people if you're a friend. And one of the things that came across very strongly was in terms of mental health, people wanted to support friends. So I will come out at this point, and I'm sorry that's probably gone on a bit longer than I'd hoped, but I hope it does give you some context. So Nihara, if I can stop sharing and we can sort of hand over to you now, and you're going to be telling us about 3 of the apps that we support on good thinking, and perhaps a little bit about Stem4 as well, and again the sort of thinking and ideas that underpinned all of your developments. You're on mute, sadly, and I abruptly should switch.
Apologies. You'd think by now I'd be okay with this. Okay, here we go. Right, so very good afternoon. Thank you very much for asking Stem4. Just a very tiny bit of background to Stem4. We're a teenage mental health charity. We are based in Merton, in Wimbledon, in London, and we do 2 main bits of work. The first is face-to-face involvement with young people. We work with secondary schools, colleges, and more recently universities, where we provide mental health information. We provide mental health literacy and also information to a variety of different groups, whether they're young people, their parents and carers, their friends, health professionals, on early identification and steps that you can take. So that's one arm of our service, and it's very much focused on our name, which is STEM, or the idea of stemming the rising tide of a problem. So we focus on early intervention. And our face-to-face work also then has informed and directed our suite of apps that we offer. So we've got a digital arm to our service. We offer our mental health education digitally. We have a head ed program in schools, but we have 4 mental health apps, and we are absolutely thrilled that 3 of them are on the Good Thinking website and that we are working with Good Thinking on it. Just to say, and I'm not going to go through it, thank you very much for running through all of the important work that has to be carried out when you develop an app. But in terms of the work that we do, I am very, very keen to provide an evidence-based model of a product. By profession, I am a practicing consultant clinical psychologist, and I know that there are many very good evidence-based therapies. So the idea is clinically driven and is backed up by research and evidence, and that's research and evidence that exists in terms of both psychological as well as government-based design, but we also do our own. So we work with our schools and we ask young people what they want. We are really, really keen on user group co-design and co-creation, and so we adapt whatever we create to work with young people. We really feel we embed a young person's voice, and we also work with parents and we work with teachers, because we feel that if we don't have their buy-in and their involvement and voice, again, we are unlikely to have the success that we have. As for all people who create digital work, we are very firm on our clinical risk frameworks. We work on a hugely iterative model of developing and continuing to develop based on the feedback that we get. We have a pilot study we carry out. We try and also carry out through with the research study, and then we will take it to market. And we work with we don't believe as a charity in charging our end user, so all our products are free, but we work within a licensing model with either health or other statutory and private organizations, and also we apply for grants. So the first of our apps that we have worked in partnership that we provide for good thinking is ClearFear. So a very quick snapshot picture of ClearFear. It's an app, as per the word, the title, to help young people manage anxiety. It arose really as a development from our first app. Our first app, you may have heard about, it's called Calm Harm, and it's a niche app to help young people manage their urge to self-harm. But what we found from our users and also from our work with schools that people were using Calm Harm, which uses another form of treatment to help manage anxiety rather than self-harm. And so we then developed ClearFear, which uses a form of treatment called cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT, which has got a very strong evidence of effectiveness in terms of both online and face-to-face impact with regards helping young people manage anxiety symptoms. So just without being too boastful, ClearFear is about 2.5 years old. We've got just under 500,000 downloads. We are really proud that 79% of our users are under 25 years. We have a very large proportion of young Londoners who use it. Really excitingly, about 94% of our users say that using the app helped their anxiety, to manage their anxiety in the moment, either significantly or a little. We have lots of demographic data which help us to kind of isolate, and we've been very lucky at winning a number of awards. And currently we are running a 12-week ethical committee approved research study on looking longitudinally over 12 weeks on young people with anxiety symptoms using ClearFear. I think it's always good to know how an app works. So just to say that we have got an animated video and some COVID guidance. We have a booklet to help young people, and that really is based on looking at some of the trends. So over the pandemic, and this isn't the graph that I have at the moment, but over the pandemic, we were tracking how young people use this. But just out of interest, this is a trend of downloads in the UK between January and May. And it's very interesting to look at the peak. So the first peak was just as young people returned to school. The second, the first peak was perhaps exams. The second peak was just after half term. And sometimes we've also been able to see a kind of a download that comes through when there's been an announcement or post coming out of one period of lockdown. So what young people will do if they go and they say they live in London is that they will then link to the Good Thinking site of ClearFear. Young people are asked to set up a section to keep themselves safe, so things they can do when they're anxious, people they can talk to, and then also sources that they can access, and that will again link up with Good Thinking. And as they work through the app, things that they can do become more apparent, and those then get added to their safety net. So that's a really useful section for anyone who is anxious in terms of resourcing. The app comprises the two parts. The first bit, the Clear Your Fear bit, is the more traditional CBT model, and I've got some screens to just run you through. The second part of the app are really based on some of the things that young people said would be useful for them when they felt anxious. So if you look at the CBT model of the app, it really focuses on 4 main sections, which is a traditional CBT approach. It helps young people to provide them with ways to deal with their emotions. It either helps them focus on their thoughts, we call it managing your worries. It helps them to manage their behaviors or reacting to worries, and then help them set some physical targets, whether it's around sleep or eating. Again, very much linking with the Good Thinking information that's there to help them manage their anxiety. If they tick the dealing with emotions section, then they are given 3 different elements of the menu. They can either express their emotions in a helpful way, they can learn to become calm, or indeed change anxiety into something else that might be more humorous for them. So expressing yourself gives them a whole menu of different things that they can do to express themselves. For example, here's one which says, you know, here, draw your anxiety and then work on making the anxiety something that you can identify and also manage. And this acknowledges the fact that not everyone can actually speak or describe their anxiety. They might be able to draw it instead, or to action it in some way. And at the end of every screen, they're asked whether the activity helped. It prompts them to then rate their anxiety, the level they were at the beginning, how it helped them at the end, and whether they'd like to journal something. And of course, it also asks them whether they would like to go and access further information on the Good Thinking website. If they tick the second section of staying calm on the website, then they can have a breathing activity or do some mindfulness exercises. And interestingly, these two are some of the sections that are the most visited. So the breathing activity will focus on a diaphragmatic breathing exercise to sort of breathe in and out in a very calm way. And it will also point out if their breathing is really erratic and they feel that they need to access it immediately, then on the bottom half of the app, they can access it through immediate help and support. The mindfulness exercises are really nice. We had quite a lot of fun asking young people to choose scenes that they would find interesting. So if you do have a beach, then you can mindfully look at a scene for as long as you might want to. And then again, it will ask you to rate whether you feel calmer. And the Laugh or Smile section actually has a joke box. Again, young people provided us with these jokes. They are better than Christmas cracker jokes, but they are jokes that appeal to young people, or indeed they'll have a series of gifts that they can borrow. So for example, here's a joke: why did the banana go to see the doctor? Because it wasn't peeling well. Or indeed a smile section on a variety of different gifts that young people use. And actually this is visited quite often. If, on the other hand, young people are overthinking or over worrying, then it will lead them to a more traditional CBT section on the app, which is to help them to recognize anxious thoughts, to isolate them, and then to be able to work with them using some very standard, it doesn't look like standard CBT strategies, but that is what they are. So it gives them a little bit of text, not too much, because young people told us they don't want to read too much information. And then it helps them to choose a warrior, as we call them. So we've got the shrinking negative thoughts warrior, which is the sort of more catastrophic type thinking that comes with anxiety. We have the in the middle warrior, which helps to balance all or nothing thoughts, or the what if warrior, the warrior that helps to sort of not make too many anxious negative predictions and then overthink things. And then you can choose one of these and it will run through ways in which you can help yourself to deal with those thoughts. And then those positive thoughts go on your safety net for later if you want to save them. The third section checks on anxious behaviors. We know that when young people get anxious, they either overdo things, so they might overcheck things, for example, or they might avoid doing things. So it gives them the option of looking at their behavior, understanding that that might be one of the things they do when they're anxious, and then to choose one of those, set themselves a target, provide themselves with some motivational statements, and be able to make a change. And the final section on ClearFear in the more traditional CBT line is to help them to set some good physical goals. So we know, for example, that exercise helps young people manage anxiety. Eating a balanced diet, again, will help avoid either massive sugar loads or having too many, caffeine-formed drinks, help them to make more time to relax or set some sleep goals. So they can choose some of those. It gives them some information on things that they can do, and then they can actually set a goal and they will get a reward for achieving that particular goal. On the bottom section they will be able, if they don't want to do a particular CBT section, they can access a grit box, which really focuses a little bit on resilience. And this is a hugely popular section of the ClearFear app. So we've got inspirational statements and quotes and inspirational people. And these, again, are young people who have provided us with, through the work we do with schools. So we have a number of people who have talked about their anxiety and how they might just have a quote or something that they might be able to do, because young people would be far kind of important on kind of dealing with anxiety through listening to another young peer. We have a number of and it also provides them with some information. It gives them information on different forms of anxiety, and on the good thinking side, we've also added health anxiety, since that has been there around the pandemic. So there's a little bit of information on different types of anxiety you might experience, and then it directs you to where you can use it on the app. Immediate help, again, is a section that uses a lot, and it helps young people deal with symptoms of panic. It tells them what a panic attack might be. We know with our work from schools, and I certainly know from my own clinical practice, that there's been an increase of young people presenting with panic attacks post-pandemic on their return back to school or college. And it will give them either a progressive muscle relaxing video to help them focus on it, or do some breathing exercises. And the immediate help will also send them to the Good Thinking website and the resources that young Londoners can access in the context of what might help them the most. As per all good models, we encourage our young people to learn to self-monitor and self-track. So at the back of the app, if they would like to look at all of their particular thoughts, they can access that. It will show them when their anxiety might be at the highest. It will help them to be able to see things that work for them, tasks that work for them. And if their anxiety remains high, we've also got a pop-up message that comes saying, how about trying some other resource? And it will again direct them to another resource that might be available. So I'll have a quick break there just to see whether anyone has any questions on ClearFear.
Thank you, Nihara. That was wonderful, and it just captures so vividly the amount of sophistication. I mean, we've sometimes talked at Good Thinking about an app, or even Good Thinking being like a therapist in your pocket, and you know, that really is a therapist in an app on your phone, with the amount of opportunity to personalize that support, which is fantastic. And I suspect a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know just how much opportunity there is there for that personalized support. So if you could put in the chat, or I guess raise the hand if there are any comments or thoughts or questions that you might want to put to Nihara. I mean, whilst you might be thinking, a couple of things struck me. I mean, one, looking at the graph you had at the beginning, Nihara, about how different moments in a young person's life or an announcement might stir anxiety for them, and sometimes that can be very distressing news. We definitely wanted to be working with you to be supportive of young people, particularly when exam results emerge or assessment results emerge this August, because we know lots of young people are struggling with these teacher assessments, etc., and it's a much more complicated time for them. And again, how both this webinar and the app can be shared through networks around those times. In our research, young people said they wish schools would have a counsellor there on site for results days, because it's odd, isn't it, that it's such an important day in that person's life, and yet within the health service we carry on as if it's business as usual. And then secondly, it was in the news today about the number of young people struggling with health anxiety, with fear of germs and so on. And again, how agile and adaptive a product like this can be in terms of incorporating new areas, new exercises, etc., to support. So just fantastically flexible and adaptive for the needs of young people.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Yes, just to mention, when we were taking our pandemic data last year, when the A-level results came out, we had an enormous peak. So yes, exams is not just taking exams, but it's actually what happens when you have results that you need support both ends.
So we will make sure this is cascaded through our education colleagues, I think, in preparation for, I think, what is the 11th of August?
Yes.
Well,
shall I continue?
I think we should continue because there's two other really great apps to be talking about.
Yes, okay. So our second app, MoveMood, is our newest app. Now, we were actually developing this through the pandemic. We were very kindly supported by Comic Relief and the Paul Hamlyn Foundation just before COVID hit. And for those of you who might be interested in data, I know, Richard, again, you had some very, very useful data there, but the National Health Interview Survey last year in 2020 said that from the percentage of adults who experience symptoms of depression, depression was highest amongst those aged 18 to 29. So I think that that's really important. And I think if you look at my little circle, the 85% of young people who use our app are under 25. And we do have a number, I think out of that 85, about 25% are between the ages of 17 to 25. So we are absolutely supporting that slightly older demographic in terms of their mood. So MoveMood is an app that uses another form of evidence-based treatment. It's something that actually targets the behaviors that are connected with depression or low mood, rather than necessarily the thoughts. We know that the behaviors that impact young people are really unhelpful and disabling for them in terms of getting on with their work. So, for example, withdrawal from friends, self-neglect, finding it procrastination, but in a sort of very unhelpful major way, finding it difficult to go into school or college. So the app really focuses on a treatment that tries to engage young people who might be feeling really demotivated and low in mood. And the way it does it is through providing them with the opportunity to be reminded of things that matter to them. So it uses what's called a values-based approach. So if what matters to them is connecting with friends, if what matters to them is doing something creative, then the treatment says, start off with doing something that matters to you, because if you can start off, it's getting started that's important. And as you learn that you can do something and you learn to replace low mood with another feeling, whether it's curiosity, whether it's a small feeling of I can, then that will start to shift your mood into a better place. So we only released this at the end of December. It's a really new app, and our promotional work has not been very big as a result of the pandemic, but we're really proud that we've already got 10,000 users, and that's just until May. These figures are just January to May figures. And of them, we have a number. It's the app that has the most number of returning users. So we know young users are engaged in helping encourage their motivation. And even if their mood might not be low, it's really helped in terms of the pandemic, when everyone's felt quite flat and thought, oh, I just can't get up and go. It's been a really good motivating app. So it's used by 25% of our users are young Londoners. And again, we have a special COVID guidance video, as well as a booklet that we can use it. And 70% of the young people who use our app are not in treatment. So we are we've got a market for all our apps that are young people who either might not meet the threshold for treatment, or actually may never access treatment for a number of different reasons. So just if you are interested, we had a huge number of increase again that same week. It's very, very interesting. The same week in terms of exams. Also, maybe it's around January, when, you know, that third week of January is supposed to be Blues Monday, I think is when people are meant to experience the highest rate of low mood. But also, again, in terms of return back to school after half term. MoveMood needs a little bit of help with setting up, and if your mood is low, that's not the easiest. So it might be that if you're a therapist or if you're a parent, that actually working with a young person in helping them to get set up on the app is something useful that you could do. So it uses the analogy of lifting a weight. All our apps have got some sort of sporty analogy. So ClearFear was all about gliding, and MoveMood is about lifting weights and getting fitter. So it encourages you to join in. It asks you to spend a little bit of time. And then first of all, it asks you to set up 3 tasks, one that's a routine task, one that's a necessary task, and one that's an enjoyable task. And you can choose the schedule. So we have got young people to look at the categories that young people have values in. They're backed by the theory, but also young people have given us certain other ideas. So whether it's doing things with the community, as I said, doing things with friends or in relationships, whether it's enhancing their physical well-being. So they choose a category. It gives them a menu of things they can do if they're finding it really hard to come up with something, but you can also add your own ideas. So let's say I choose physical well-being because I've been neglecting that. I've been at home, and I've decided based on the menu that I want to try and do at least half an hour of exercise every day. I can then add some steps on how I'm going to do that. So in the column, I could say, well, I'm going to set every morning at 9 o'clock aside to get up. I will ring my friend and tell them to try and join me down the road. Whatever it is, I'll set up some steps. I will then categorize that's a necessary task. I'm going to make that a necessary task so it doesn't drop off my radar. I will rate it on how easy I'm going to find it, and then I will also rate my mood at the moment, and then I can choose a companion. So I'm going to do that daily, so I'll set that as daily. I'll also set when I'm going to do it and for how long I'm going to do it, and then I'll choose a companion. So I've chosen this little yellow person, but there are a whole range of either animals or other things that you can choose, and there are motivators, there are companions. We set a push notification, and then it will come up and it will help you to be on track. So I actually have got a reminder on my phone to try and drink some water every day at 3 o'clock, and I have a little memory that comes up going, have you had your glass of water? So, you know, it can be as simple as that if you wanted to do that. And because we recognize that when your mood is low and you're not motivated, it's really hard, we've gamified the app so that you can win little awards, you can share those awards, and you can collect a little series of awards that you can do. And we have little motivating messages from your companion that will come up if you wanted to tell you how to do. And then it kind of gives you a little task tracker, and it has lots of information on depression. And again, as per ClearFear, it will direct you to the Good Thinking and other website in order to be able to do that. So, do you have any questions on MoveMood?
I imagine a lot of people are thinking, wow, and that's just number 2, Nihara.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, perhaps we should keep moving, but I just want to make one point that Tioni might want to come back to at the end, which is what's coming across to me that I think is talked about is how can we help people understand how to set these up as well and get the most out of them, because this is a treasure chest of all sorts of ideas that will, you know, whether it's around anxiety or mood, absolutely boost how you're feeling. And yeah, so just leave that as a thought at this point. But let's hear about combined minds, because
yes,
there's more.
Yes, there's more. So the third app we have with Good Thinking is Combined Minds. Now, Combined Minds has got a rather sad sort of reason for starting. 2 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, the charity had a huge number of people support us, and they were supporting us in memory of somebody that they had lost. And we had both parents and carers, and we had friends. And it was a time when many young people, they'd lost a young person to suicide. And so we got together, we had a parent who contacted us saying, is there anything you can offer parents that's more than just going on a website, but that can help us in the moment in terms of what we can say when we've got a young person who might be depressed, or when we've got a young person who has an eating disorder? Is there anything that we can do and say and keep on track, and also maybe have something that will help us set up a communication and a way that we work together rather than feel as though we're working against our young person? So that's actually how it started. Because we work with schools, we then opened it up to our young people, and they said, actually, the biggest problem for us is not knowing how to support a friend. We kind of say things, and Richard, that sort of coincides with that wonderful comment that you placed, is that friends were saying, we want to say what's right. We don't want to become their therapist, but we also don't want to feel neglectful. So it'd be really useful if you can help us with that. So Combined Minds was released just at the start of the pandemic. So we have around 31,000 downloads. Again, all of this has been quite organic. As a charity, we have a tiny marketing budget, so people just discover us, really. And interestingly, unlike our other apps, our most users of our Combined Mind apps are British users, which we're again really proud to say happens. So 49% of our users, unlike the others, are supporting a young person receiving care. And 76% of the people who used it said it helped them in terms of managing a friend or a young person who was going through it. And the 42% of parents are supporting a young person who's aged between 14 and 16. So again, looking at your data, Richard, just to say that that actually is a peak time, isn't it, in terms of young people presenting with a mental health issue. So we are really proud that we can provide something that is an early intervention tool. So what do we use to support young people? And again, in terms of downloads, a very similar pattern, but actually it's remained consistently high in terms of use, supporting somebody going through a difficult time. In the pandemic, very interestingly, last year, our user base used to be primarily parents, but it switched to peer-to-peer support. So I think a lot of young people were reaching out to friends who they might have accessed at school or college. They were reaching out to them in alternative ways. So the app uses what's called a strengths-based approach. So rather than looking at deficits in a young person, you know, you can't do this, or you're not getting up and being able to kind of brush your hair or get ready, it uses what's called a strengths-based approach, which is getting parents and friends to think differently about a young person. What strengths do they have, and how might they use those strengths to be able to get back on track? So it focuses on anxiety, depression, self-harm and eating disorders. And then we were asked by parents whether we could help them with what they call digital addiction. So we have a special section on that, on excess use or misuse of digital products. And what you do is, it's really easy. You go on there, you pick on which section you want to, whether you're a parent, carer or a friend, and then it provides you with a menu of different things that you can do. Again, you can create a safety plan, and parents and friends create this with the young person, so everyone's on track in terms of having some sort of communication tool if a young person is feeling really at risk, then what they can say and do and who they can contact. It's very simple to negotiate. It gives a little bit of information to parents and friends on how anxiety, let's say in this case, might affect them, and that if they're avoiding something, it might be because they're anxious of facing it rather than because they're lazy, for example, and how to manage those difficult behaviors. So it helps them through a little bit of a problem-solving strategy of identifying a goal, deciding with the young person how they're going to deal with it, outlining a bit of a plan, and then how they might use different steps to make that change. And of course, we recognize that the impact is not just on the young person, but also on either the parent, carer, or friends. So we really provide young people and their parents with tips of things they can do to look after themselves. And again, we will direct them onto the Good Thinking website and onto other national sources, depending on how they might feel. And I just want to highlight there has been an increase in eating disorders over the pandemic in particular, and this page is used quite significantly by parents on Good Thinking website in terms of some of the things that they might be able to do to support a young person going through time. And we have had a number of therapists and clinicians tell us that they use it together with a parent or a young person to kind of create a more cohesive treatment plan. Well, these are all some of the data that we create, and that's my bit really. Thank you.
Thank you again, Nihara. And again, it's just something that I guess we all know, which is for anyone who has access support for mental health, you may have an hour a week, sometimes more, with a therapist such as yourself, but it's then when you're back at home and in the moment or with your friend somewhere that you might need something to support you, and it's just wonderful, I think, to have that in the moment support. So yeah, excellent. And I think we will be chunking these videos as well, so people can go straight to, say, each app if they're interested. I wonder at this point, Tierney, if I might ask you, in terms of working with young people, our digital health ambassadors who are incredibly supportive of each other and of supporting the health of young Londoners. Any thoughts from the work you're doing and hearing about these different apps today?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Tierney, the social media lead for Partnership Young London. And so, yeah, we're a small charity that looks at youth policy and practice. And so we've collaborated with Good Thinking and Healthy London Partnership for like the last 2 years on projects such as Checking In Report, which was actually supported by TikTok. We've done lockdown surveys, and most recently we've been commissioned by Good Thinking to develop the digital health ambassador offer. And so the most exciting thing we've been up to recently is developing content which is being co-created by our incredible young people, such as the user reviews for the mental health apps like Feeling Good. And we've got more content lined up for ClearFear, which is the app Nihara was mentioning earlier, which is a good app to help cope with anxiety, especially next month when exam results will be coming out for young people. So yeah, we've also created some case studies from previous ambassadors on why they got involved, and TikTok videos are in the works as well, because everyone loves a bit of TikTok, and it is also a great way to engage our young people in this generation, because they're always on like these sort of apps. Yeah, I'll post a few links of the works we've previously done on the chat, so yeah, you can feel free to have a look. And if you know anyone who'd like to become a digital health ambassador, please get in contact with me for more info. So I'll put down my email address in the chat as well.
That's great, Tierney. And yeah, marvelous to think that, I guess, what Nihara's been describing, we can, as a campaign, make available to young people around Results Day. And there's a part of me still struggling a bit, Nihara, with how we capture. I don't know whether it's an infographic or something that just outlines the sheer wealth of different ways of boosting your mood or improving or reducing your anxiety, I should say. That could be, you know, a joke or a breathing exercise or whatever it is. That perhaps, Tierney, we might want to sort of workshop that in a way to just see how we can help people get that across. I do also want to just touch on something that you've responded to, Nihara, that Shelby's put in the chat, which is, are you going to be extending to other areas such as exam stress and LGBTQ+ issues? I don't know whether the chat's going to be entirely visible on the webinar video, but I don't know if you just want to speak to that for a moment, because that's something, as Shelby points out, is incredibly important to young people now.
Yes, this year as a charity, Stem4 have focused on really developing LGBTQ plus resources, and as well as BAME resources. So we've developed a whole range of things, from translations for BAME, but we've just started hosting some blogs on our website. And as part of that, we really feel that Combined Minds has a huge amount of potential to start to think about how we might be able to extend our offer through using digital too. So we want to extend the peer-to-peer support section. So later on this year, at the moment we're reviewing and redoing a new version for our first app, Calm Harm, but we want to really have a look at Combined Minds and extend the peer-to-peer support section. So we would love to work, Tierney, with you, with Shelby, whoever, to get more young voices on board.
That sounds fantastic. So that's good news, because we were going to ask you towards the end what your next steps were, but you've already started, and the work continues. So that's great news. It's awful, really, that time feels, I thought an hour would feel like a long time, but actually it feels like we're just starting. But if there are any other comments, nice review there from Shelby of your plans, which is great. And Tierney, I think there is just something about sort of how we do try and get across to other people that, you know, when you go to an app store or even Good Thinking and you look at something, it's really hard to understand all that breadth of opportunity. So I think we'll be working on that from our end, Nihara, because it's all there, isn't it? You download it and it's there, whether it's a Friday night or a Sunday morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, and all those times where you might really need support, but it's not going to be easy to get from traditional services. So really great to just be hearing all of that.
Yes. Also, just to say, Richard, that sometimes you don't need, sometimes you might just need a top up. So we had a young person recently who contacted us and said they used it 2 years ago. They're going to an interview and they wanted some, and they thought, oh, I'll go back and use it. So, you know, sometimes you might have just a little top up that you might want.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. Not everything has to be 10 weeks of therapy. You can do something in the moment for yourself too. So that's a great point. Well, I think we have just about reached the end. For anyone who's interested, please visit Good Thinking, where you'll also find ways of signing up to our newsletter for follow-up sort of information about our developments, which will be absolutely in collaboration with organizations like Stem4. Thank you for those of you who've contributed, to Nihara, of course, and Tierney, and you know, in both areas, lots of new developments and things to look forward to. And as often the case with COVID, you know, for all the sadness, the loss, and at times the devastation, there's some really good things happening as well that might actually lead to something better too. So thank you to everyone. We'll be following this up with further webinars later in the summer, but for the meantime, also hopefully enjoy the sunshine if where you are at the moment the sun is shining. So take care, everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.